Normally, when I make long form content, it's usually something I've had quite a bit of time to think about. An idea that's been ruminating in my head for a while, and I've been able to gather all my thoughts for a while on it. And this is not one of those videos. Admittedly, it's been a while since I've done a YouTube video. It's usually been Instagram Reels or TikToks and all of that. But um, this is a topic I've covered in a vacuum before, which is tie-in novels. You may have seen that Astarion is getting a prequel novel set in the time leading up to the Baldur's Gate 3 games when we see him, right? And a lot of people are talking about it, and a lot of people are very, very excited. And I am cautiously optimistic. I'm not familiar with the author, but I've heard the author has done a lot of really good work in the past, Again, this is a character a lot of people like. Hell, the audiobook is being voiced and being narrated by the voice actor for Astarion. So a lot of things to look forward to here. But it is a tie-in novel, specifically a Dungeons and Dragons tie-in novel. And I don't know if you've read many D&D tie-in novels. I've read a few of them. They have, you know, they have a habit of not always being the best. So I want to talk about my thoughts on the Astarion tie-in novel, what I think it needs to do right in order to be a good tie-in, and where it might fall short. Before we continue, my name is Robin. I go by the Eclectus on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram. I have some platforms. Actually, my Instagram has been taking off recently. So if you're one of those people who has started following me not just on TikTok, but also on Instagram, a huge thank you to you. Anyways, let's talk about it. Let's talk about Astarion. So, yes, Astarion was a breakout star of a character from Baldur's Gate 3. I like Astarion. He wasn't my favorite companion, but I think, hey, Neil Newbon did an amazing job voicing him. I think his arc is one that resonates with a lot of people. It's an arc that resonates with me. Um, Very charismatic character, witty, charming, and of course, a vampire elf. A lot going for Astarion. And the gist of it, without going into any spoilers of Baldur's Gate 3, is that Astarion is a vampire spawn who serves the vampire Cazador, and leading up to the events of Baldur's Gate 3, it is said that he sort of would find victims for Cazador, and he himself was implied to go through a lot of abuse from his vampiric master. That's sort of the spark notes of it. It's been a while since I've played a full playthrough of BG3, so forgive me if that's not the most thorough description of events for his character, but he's been a breakout star. Really has been. Him and Karlak, I feel like, are the two that still, despite BG3 being a game that is a few years old now, which I hate thinking about. I hate thinking about that. Despite the game being a few years old, I mean, in the Forgotten Realms 5.5 expansion for D&D, Karlak was a pretty prominent fixture in the art of those books. And I think they also released an Astarion themed one shot. It was something, right? But when they go back and they release stuff pertaining to Baldur's Gate 3, Astarion and Karlak usually have some sort of involvement. And this is, although I feel like, and from what I can gather, one of the first times where, in terms of D&D tie-in, it's not an original character to a tie-in series. I think of Drizzt and Wolfgar and Catti-brie and all of those characters from the Salvatore novels, right? Like, usually I feel like they go back to that, or they write characters for a novel. This is the first time I've really seen a character from another D&D property be the subject of a tie-in. But this is Astarion's story. This is about his life as a vampire spawn, and it is a prequel. And that's the first thing I want to talk about, and the first thing that is kind of concerning to me is the fact that this is a prequel. I understand why it is a prequel, because also we're apparently getting a sequel series to Baldur's Gate 3 TV show. I think that was announced a few months back. So, yeah, I'm sure they don't want to cover that and step on the toes of that work going on. But it is worth pointing out that, yes, this is a prequel story. And that is the first thing that sort of makes me a little uneasy about the whole entire thing, because Astarion's arc, a lot of it is sort of breaking free from the role that his vampiric master gave him and becoming his own person and starting to like practice healthier habits as a person, which when you meet him at the beginning of Baldur's Gate 3, he's a very vindictive person. He openly admits to manipulating and using members of the party. Admits to using you at certain points if you pick certain dialogue options, right? These things right here are when you meet him, and again, as the game progresses, you do see him become a better person, but he's not a great person at the beginning of the game, right? His character arc happens through the game, as a good character arc does. You don't want the character you meet to be the final version of the character when you're playing a 40-plus hour game. That begs the question, though. Well, what's the prequel gonna cover? I don't want to read a book where it's just a character being bad, not making any real change, and the book ending. And especially because there's a lot of themes of implied abuse in many forms that we're probably going to end up reading. We're probably going to end up seeing in this book. And yeah, well, sure, we know that if we know as an audience that, well, in the games, Astarion becomes a different person. How do you make a fulfilling character arc leading up to Baldur's Gate 3 that does not directly contradict the changes that happen, that allows the changes in Baldur's Gate 3 to happen? And I just don't see that happening in a prequel. And it is, and I get it. I get it, because at the same time, the kind of game Baldur's Gate 3 is, you can't just really novelize it, because there's so many ways the game can play out. Right? So that is my first concern, is that yes, it is a prequel. How are we going to put a character arc in there? How are we going to put an arc in there that, hey, we already know that this character is going to make it out the end? How are we going to make this an interesting arc? Interesting character, which I can see a few possibilities of it. I mean, I think we could see a much worse off Astarion in the beginning. We're probably going to see once he first gets turned into a vampire and all of that. And we could see like a sort of microcosm of him discovering, well, being able to live as a vampire, being able to live with himself and the actions he's had to take to survive. We can see that fulfilled in a way that gets him from a really bad point to almost like a kind of rough point, which then will lead into Baldur's Gate 3, which you can then finish the arc and all of that. Right? That's one way I could see it happening. I mean, but overall, there's a lot of heavy lifting there. And another thing I want to talk about, moving on from that for a little bit, this is a tie-in novel. And I think a lot of people just have not read tie-in novels. Not that many big book series are tie-ins to previously established media. And as someone who has read tie-in novels, there are a lot of good ones. There are. To list a few off my head, I really like the Assassin's Creed tie-ins. I think those are pretty good. The most recent Magic the Gathering tie-in, which I'm not done with, but I'm about 75% of the way through, the Strixhaven novel, it's actually pretty good for what it does. But there are a lot of really bad tie-in novels. The Icewind Dale slash the Salvatore novels, in my opinion, are very not good. Also, a lot of like the Star Wars extended universe novels. Again, there's a lot, especially in the tabletop space. There are a lot of just not good tie-ins, guys. And again, I'm not familiar with the author they picked for the Astarion novel, but I've heard good things about them. Um, but one thing is how are we tackling the tie-in here? Right? A lot of tie-in novels are just generic fantasy plots with buzzwords, with buzz names in them. Like in the Icewind Dale series, you could have that story take place in any generic fantasy setting. It just happens to take place in the D&D Faerun. Um, what separates a good tie-in novel from a bad one, and there are a lot of things, but I think the main thing that I really look for is this a story that takes full advantage of its setting? And I think one book, again, the book I'm reading right now, the Strixhaven Curriculum of Chaos, I think is the full name of it. I think that does a really good job of it because a lot of the conflict comes from very unique magic lore, Magic the Gathering lore, like the Phyrexian invasion and planeswalkers and all of that stuff. That a lot of heavy lifting is done on the fact that these are pre-existing things in the setting. You couldn't really have that story in Middle Earth, in the Star Wars universe. These are unique things, and again, a lot of D&D tie-ins that I have engaged with are just very generic fantasy novels of, oh, there's an evil wizard who's raising an undead army, and the heroes have to come together and collect a magic artifact and stop the evil wizard. And it's like, cool, you could just change the names of these characters and plop this in someone else's setting. Which sends it. I do think though that this is a problem that I'm a little less concerned about compared to the prequel angle, because it is specifically an Astarion novel, and there's already a lot of unique lore for Astarion that they're going to have to cover that is not generic. Um, I think that, how do I put this? The fact that this is a unique case where they are bringing a character in who is not from a D&D tie-in property novel, and that they're bringing in who is established in Baldur's Gate 3, I think that means I think that bodes well. I'm hoping that this is a story that only Astarion could tell, that only Astarion could engage with, and that's not just generic vampire story in fantasy world. Which, that again, all of my concerns are stuff that we're just gonna have to wait and see. But let's wrap this up. Really, I'm excited. I'm day one. I'm gonna pre-order this book. I'm gonna read it day one. I'm a bit concerned, and again, this story is a sensitive one. It's one that a lot of people want to see. I hope the author handles it with care, and I will be there day one, and I will talk about it when it comes out later this year. I, um, what's the word I'm looking for? I strongly encourage all of you to seek this story out on your own and read it or listen to it on your own and form your own opinions on it. Right? These are just some concerns I have as someone who has read D&D tie-ins. And maybe maybe the things that I don't like about tie-ins are things you don't mind, or hell, maybe the things you like. Go check it out. Support authors like this. Support projects like this. We are in a day and age where it is important to engage with this sort of media. And do please, if you have the ability to, pre-order it, order it on launch. A lot of fantasy series, I feel like, we are steering away from this tie-in novelization, tie-in media, this physical media. We need to show people these people up top who only look at numbers, that we want more physical media, more written media, more narrated media for our games. So I do think you should go out and form your own opinions if you can. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. I hope you have a good one. It's a beautiful weekend where I'm at. I hope you're having a good time. Take care.